Hello, welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Thomas Lord Cromwell, and we get to hear the Act 3 prologue today, which is interesting because we all know that there's variations in Shakespearean text. We've already talked a couple of times in this play specifically about how there's a character either named Friscobald or Friscobald or Frescobald or Frisco Ball. There's a bunch of different variations there, but there's also sometimes variations in how the scenes are laid out. So this prologue, or this moment where the chorus comes onto the stage, in some versions is tacked onto the end of Act 3, Scene 2, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It makes a little bit more sense to have this prologue be an act break as opposed to and now we're just going to go and do something else. So in those versions where this particular bit is at the end of Act 3, Scene 2, the last couple scenes that we've done were already in Act 3. But for the sake of some consistency here, because we will catch up by Act 4, we're going to say that we finished off with Act 2, Scene 4 yesterday. We're going to talk about Act 2, Scene 5, and then we're going to do this Act 3 prologue. So in Act 2, Scene 4, remember, Cromwell and Hodge had made it to Florence, where they had been robbed. So they posted notices on this bridge, and Friscobald found the notices and said, "Oh, you're Englishmen, I love the English, I will happily help you out. Here's money for food and for clothes and hire a horse. Do you want to come back and have dinner before you head out on your way?" And Cromwell's like, "No, I really need to get to Bologna to help the Earl of Bedford because he has been sentenced to death while he's there, so I got to go help him." And Friscobald is like, "Absolutely, go take care of what you need to take care of." So Act 2, Scene 5, we are in Bologna, in an inn, where Bedford is sort of hiding out, and we're there with Bedford and his host. And this inn is surrounded by Frenchmen who are insisting that Bedford surrender because they want to kill him and deliver his body back to France. But of course, Bedford is a proud Englishman, so he doesn't want his body to end up in France. He's adamantly opposed to this. He doesn't want to surrender in the first place, but he also doesn't want his final resting place to be France. So a servant comes in and says, "There's a Neapolitan man outside that wants to come in and negotiate." And Bedford's like, "Okay, that's curious, but all right, have him come in." But of course, it's not a Neapolitan man that comes in. It's Cromwell and Hodge in disguise. Because remember, they were given some money for clothing, so they bought clothing to disguise themselves as people from Naples, as Neapolitans. So as soon as Cromwell gets in, he's like, "Oh, Mr. Host, thank you so much. If you can please just leave us so that we can conduct our business, that'd be great." And the host leaves, and Cromwell is basically like, "Ta-da! I'm Cromwell, and I'm your friend." And he's like, "Oh my goodness, you're Cromwell. I remember you from growing up." And Hodge is like, "Yep, and me too. I used to be a blacksmith that worked for you." So everybody's all happy that Cromwell and Hodge are here to help Bedford. And Cromwell is like, "If we can just get you to the port of Mantua, you'll be safe, because Mantua and Bologna are fighting right now. So if we can get you to Mantua, they will help protect you." And Bedford is like, "Okay, great, but we're surrounded. So how do we even just leave this building?" And Cromwell's like, "Well, just switch clothes with Hodge. Nobody knows what you actually look like. So switch clothes with Hodge. We'll leave Hodge here to be you, and you and I can just basically walk out the front door." And Bedford's like, "Okay, but what about Hodge?" And Hodge is like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll be fine." So the two of them go off to switch clothes. And while they're changing, Cromwell does have a moment. It's not long enough to be a monologue for this project, but he does have a moment where he is a little bit concerned about Hodge. He's like, "I hope that he ends up okay. But in the grand scheme of things, we really can't lose Bedford. If Hodge happens to be a casualty, it's sort of the lesser of two evils here." So Bedford and Hodge come back in and they're like, "Aren't we cute in the wrong clothes? What do you think? Isn't this fun? Isn't this fun?" And they're like, "Yes, this is all good. This is cool." So they send Hodge to go sit in the Earl of Bedford's chair to pretend to be Bedford. And they call in the governor and some officers and all these various things. And the governor's like, "Did you get him to agree to surrender?" And Cromwell's like, yes, I did. And in the meantime, my colleague here and I need to get to Mantua." So Bedford, dressed as Hodge, along with Cromwell, in disguise as a Neapolitan, are escorted safely out to go to the port of Mantua, where they are going to go and conduct their business. And I just got to say, having recently just finished another play that had lots of people wearing the wrong clothes and just walking out the door because nobody bothers to look at faces, this cracked me up that it is, again, in this play. So anyway, they get out of there to go off to Mantua, and the governor and the officers go in and they see Hodge and they're like, oh yes, that must be him, and he's writing. And Hodge is sitting there and he's like writing some stuff that has some English people's names in it, and he sings a little song and all this sort of thing. And eventually they're like, okay, you need to come with us. But a messenger comes in from Mantua to say that the Earl of Bedford has made it safely to Mantua and demands the release of Hodge, the servant that they left behind. And if Hodge is not released, then Mantua will forget about the ceasefire that they have going on. Mantua will unleash its wrath upon Bologna. So sort of begrudgingly, the governor's like, well, I guess we have to. And Hodge is like, yep, I'm just a blacksmith. So he's allowed to leave, and the governor feels a little bit stupid for being duped, and he vows revenge on Mantua for this whole thing. And that is Act 2:5. Or in some versions, that's Act 3, Scene 2, and just tacked on to the end of Act 3, Scene 2. We are now going to see the chorus again, because we like to have this crazy Greek chorus in the middle of things to tell us what's going on. It makes much more sense if it's the Act 3 prologue. And the chorus says, thus far you see how Cromwell's fortune passed. The Earl of Bedford, being safe in Mantua, desires Cromwell's company into France to make requital for his courtesy. But Cromwell doth deny the Earl his suit, and tells him that those parts meant to see, he had not yet set footing on the land, and so directly takes his way to Spain, the Earl to France, and so they both do part. Now let your thoughts, as swift as is the wind, skip some few years that Cromwell spent in travel, and now imagine him to be in England, servant unto the master of the rules, where in short time he there began to flourish. An hour shall show you what few years did cherish. So this is a very, very fancy way of sticking up a title card that says, some time has passed. Basically, that's it. The chorus comes out and says, check it out. You see what's been going on. So once Bedford and Cromwell left, Bedford asked Cromwell to go with him, but Cromwell is like, I'm not done seeing the world yet. So he took off for Spain. Bedford went to France. They parted. Fast forward many years that Cromwell was traveling around. It doesn't tell us how many, but fast forward several years, and Cromwell is now back in England, working for the Master of Rules and doing really well there. And here's where things are going to pick up again. So that is the monologue for today. Tomorrow we're going to start in on Act 3, Scene 1. In some versions, Act 3, Scene 3. In other versions, I promise we're going to be caught up by Act 4. So I'll see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.